Okay, a very warm good afternoon, everyone, again. So now I have seen that a lot of people have joined, and since a lot of people are still joining in, so in the meantime that people are joining, we will just do a quick introduction about the session, what we are going to cover, and what can you expect and how we are going to go ahead with this particular webinar. Since this is a very, very important topic as of now. So over the past few days, we have seen some critical developments. The plastic waste management amendment rules have been notified, and exchange of also the EPR certificate has been temporarily, halted across all the five applicable portals, which is our plastic packaging, e-waste, battery, used oil, and waste IO. Right. And the introduction of this new EPR ETP platform is set to fundamentally change how credits are managed. All right. As of now, we have a little less clarity on when it is going to be launched, because as per the ticker that is going on the different portals, that CPCB will get back on this shortly. Today's session is not just very informative for you, but it is very highly relevant and time sensitive, because we are going to cover a lot of details on the new plastic waste management rules, plus all the details that have come up. So if you go back to this month, especially the month of March, we have had so many details, so many updates, notices, regulations coming out in all the EPR platforms, not only plastic but used oil, waste IO, battery, e-waste, ELV, all of them. So this tells us that the EPR landscape or the ecosystem in India is advancing every day, and CPCB and MOEFCC is getting serious by every passing day on how to implement this and how to implement it in a much more structured manner and in a strong manner for all the obligated entities to start doing their compliances in a very structured manner. So to help you understand what has changed and what it means for your business, how it is going to impact the industry, and how you should respond for a compliance perspective, we have organized this session. So first of all, a little bit about us and the leadership that we had. So ReCirculytics was founded in August 2025, and it builds on years domain expertise to deliver a focused EPR consulting and technological practice for India's evolving regulatory landscape. And at ReCirculytics, we provide end-to-end compliance support across all the notified waste streams, which are currently applicable, and all the upcoming ones as well, which is your non-ferrous and CND, which as per rules is operational from 1st April 2026, and maybe the paper and the other packaging, which is in still draft stage. Okay. And our mission, the main mission that we are aiming to, is to bridge policy, practice, and technology through data-driven solutions that strengthen governance, circularity, performance, and long-term sustainability outcomes. Our founder, Mr. Sujain Jain, he is a first attempt chartered accountant and an early pioneer in India's EPR compliance ecosystem. And which is why, we value data very much, and we work on the integration of data and circularity. All right. And he has worked with Fortune 500 companies and global packaging leaders, designing practical compliance and circularity strategies. And he continues to contribute as an EPR expert and industry speaker. At ReCirculytics, we provide different services, starting from compliance, consultancy, credits, and technology. So under compliance, we help you with the registration and end-to-end EPR compliance with your annual returns, with filings, documentation support, capacity building through EPR training and awareness sessions as well. And in the consultancy part, we help you with legal and regulatory impact analysis, transaction and fulfillment advisory, packaging footprint assessment and optimization, and representation responses to regulatory notices, such as your show cause notices or all of these things, and also EPR due diligence and policy advocacy. and also compliance audit and governance strengthening. Now, when it comes to credits, so like all of us, we are aware that the EPR credit trading in the usual scenario used to happen between a recycler and the obligated entity, but that will be changing with the coming of EPR ETP. So we help you with EPR ETP onboarding and operational support, and market-based price discovery and insights, credit lifecycle management and tracking, strategic building and procurement planning, and compliance alignment and reporting support. Also, we have some technological like software tools which helps us do your EPR compliances in a proper structured manner, in an accurate manner, without any error, and with very cost efficient and efficiency, and increase the speed of it also. So these are the services that we are offering. Now, coming directly to our webinar for today, and what are we covering today? So today we will be covering the UReP requirements and the PWM Amendment Rules 2026, and the changes that are coming up for financial year 26-27 compliance as per the rules. The newly notified reuse obligation for the rigid plastic packaging, specifically for brand owners, and managing PCR procurement, verification documentation, and CPCB filings. Also, I will be covering some latest EPR updates across different waste streams that have come in this previous month of March. And towards the end, we will be having a Q&A session wherein you can get your queries resolved. So as per the time, we will be taking a few questions as per the time allows, and then you can ask your question to the expert directly, and we will unmute the attendee, and they can ask their question directly and it will be answered. So now diving directly into the session, first of all, we are going to just cover the recent updates which have come into the portal. Since we have like little short time. So CPCB has informed all the obligated entities across plastic packaging, e-waste, battery, used oil, and waste tire that the exchange of EPR certificate on the EPR portal is closed from 1st April 2026, and CPCB shall revert on this shortly. This we have already discussed. So we need much more clarity on this, and we are hoping that CPCB will come with some sort of explanation on when the ETP will be running or how it is going to be implemented. Okay, then plastic waste management rules 2026 were finally issued on 31st March 2026, closing of the financial year. So this we are going to cover in a lot more detail in the next upcoming slides, and Sujan will be covering this in detail. Now, some show cause notices were issued for financial year 22-23 under the EPR plastic packaging framework, and 3 sets of show cause notices were issued. First was the PIBOs who have not filed annual return, but they have no unfulfilled EPR liability. Second was issued to those PIBOs who have not filed annual return and they have not fulfilled their EPR liability as well. And the third was one for the PIBOs who have filed annual returns but have not fulfilled their EPR liability. Okay, so these were the updates that have come in under the plastic packaging portal. Moving on to the EPR ELV, which is end of life vehicles, which is quite new portal, and it recently got launched on I guess 15th January 2026 only. So we have a lot of developments coming into this portal as well. Okay, so CPCB has issued 2 notices on 5th March. The first one was for the Director of Customs, wherein they asked them to factor in the EPR registration certificates or proof of application submission on EPR ELV portal while clearing imported vehicle consignments, and to all the SPCBs and PCCs, so that they immediately direct all the RBSFs that are there under their jurisdiction to register on the EPR ELV portal. SPCBs are also required to share the authorized official details so that they enable the timely processing of RBSF application. Another major update is that there has been issuance of a draft Environment Protection End of Life Vehicle Amendment Rules of 2026, which was issued on 27th March 2026. Now, with this draft, there has been a lot of changes that have come in. There is recycled content also usage. There is like a lot of historical data that has been required. There there has been change in the forms wherein they are asking for one time 20 years data from the OEMs and the producers. So there have been a lot of changes in this particular draft. And if any one of you want to understand it more deeply, you can directly connect with the team. Since today's webinar we are conducting on the PWM and UReP, so this will be little out of scope. But if anybody of you is interested or directly impacted by the environment protection end of life vehicles rules, please connect to the team directly and we will be happy to help you. Going to EPR used oil. Now, EPR used oil in the past month has seen so many changes. 31st April was the last date of filing annual returns, but we are hoping maybe there might be an extension because many entities were not able to file their annual returns because of the portal glitches or because of the unavailability of the EPR credits. So the last date was 31st March 2026, and we are hoping that it might get extended, but let's see how that happens. So in the used oil, environmental compensation guidelines were notified by CPCB, and in case of non-fulfillment of EPR obligation by producers, the applicable EC has been prescribed at rupees 12 per kg for the shortfall. And there is also an updated list of registered recyclers along with their contact details and credit availability, which is now available on your portal post login. So if you want to talk to a recycler or anything, you have the details, you can directly reach out to them. And then a document was issued by CPCB outlining procedure enabling stakeholders to update the details of authorized signatory on the used oil EPR portal. And then also there was a updated guideline document for the EPR adjustment mode, which specified the approved operational loss after usage percentage. So while we are dealing with a lot of producers under the used oil framework, all the producers were facing this major challenge about the operational loss. So for that, to clarify that, CPCB has finally issued this document, this guidance document. So it will be of great help. There is also an enhanced recycler dashboard, which was showing the certificate generated, certificate transferred, and balance of certificates available on the portal before the last date of the annual return filing, which was 31st March 2026. But as of now, it has been revoked. It is no longer available. Moving on, the next update is on your EPR e-waste. So EPR e-waste, CPCB issued some guidelines for storage and handling of solar photovoltaic modules, panels, and cells. So basically, there is no EPR liability currently, which is applicable for producers under the CEEW 14 category. And the waste management responsibility has been assigned up to financial year 2034-35. So anybody who's getting impacted by this can always go and check the guidelines and see how it is applicable. Last but not the least is our EPR waste tire. So EPR waste tire also CPCB has issued show cause notices on 23rd March. So these are for the non-compliances. So show cause notice was issued to producers for non-submission of annual returns for previous 3 financial years, year 22-23, 23-24, and 24-25. Also, a show cause notice was issued to recyclers for non-submission of annual returns for financial year 22-23, 23-24, and 24-25. And there is one more show cause notice to producers for non-fulfillment of EPR obligations for financial year 22-23. So if you have not done your obligations or you are directed by the waste tire, please look into it and see what kind of if your name exists there and what is the response that you need to give to CPCB, because this will help in your EPR compliances. Now, I will directly invite Sujain to take up the next slides, which will be covering the PWM Amendment, UReP mandate, and all the things which are very important for the industry as of now. Okay, with that, over to you, Sujain.
Thank you, Arushi. Good afternoon, everyone. The EPR ecosystem, I feel, is undergoing a structured change. Wherein first there is EPR, there is the Common SSO portal, wherein the CPCB is going to bring in a lot of changes to the existing portals. So yes, the EPR and ecosystem is changing, And the latest part of that change was the Plastic Waste Amendment Rules 2026. I know we were all waiting for these rules since they were, in the draft stage from June 2025. The impact of that, whether for someone it's positive and negative, but here we, try to understand what are the changes essentially. So we'll try to go clause by clause, but if there are some clauses, wherein the change is not very significant, we might skip it. So the first clause which was changed is the definition of end of life disposal. So so if you see the prima facie, there was no change in the definition; it was just restructured. So there is a process called chemical recycling, wherein the plastic waste is converted to a feedstock chemical or oil, that is pyro oil, and then it is again sent to refineries to make that monomer and then polymer. So that process was a little in this end of life disposal a little ambiguous, but now it has been clarified, or it has been made a little structured, wherein if it is only waste to oil conversion, then it is end of life processing. But that waste to oil conversion, if it is leading to new plastics or feedstock chemical, in that case, it will be called the process of recycling. Then the plastic waste processor, again, there was this, confusion whether chemical recycling or chemical recyclers are actually PWPs or not. So now what they have done is they have simplified the definition, saying that there are two types of entities who will be plastic waste processor. One is the recycling entity who is involved in recycling of plastic waste, that with that revised definition of end of life disposal, now the chemical recyclers will also be called as plastic waste processors. And second is the entities who are engaged in end of life disposal of plastic waste. So PWPs, the one who are recycling and one who are giving end of life credits. So there are two type of PWPs and the definition is simplified a bit. Then there was an introduction of registered environment auditor. So there was a rule which was, introduced, I guess, in December or somewhere in December, I guess, probably. That was the Environment Audit Rules 2025, wherein there is a whole process of how an auditor would be onboarded, what would be the class qualifications which we will be there. So now they have been incorporated in the rules, and they have been designated to audit the compliance which is done by the PIBOs and the PWPs, as well as the reports which have been submitted by the district panchayats to the state pollution control boards. So so ideally CPCB is now getting hands and legs to initiate audit procedures and all the other things. Excuse me. Sorry. Uh, Arushi, next slide, please. Then there was a change in Rule 11.2. That is a rule related to marking and labeling. So earlier, if any plastic packaging which had recycled content, by the virtue of plastic waste management rules, the entity marketing or introducing it into the into the market were required to mention on the label that this product has recycled content, the percentage. So we had to mention recycled having 25% recycled plastic in case it is having 25% recycled plastic, and they were required to conform with the IS standards. But now this specific requirement of mentioning on the label is being scrapped. Now the new clause states that it should confer or it should follow the BIS standard 14534. We will be discussing this standard in a detail in the parts ahead. But essentially, what will happen is below the or somewhere near the polymer code, that is 12345, which we see on the packaging generally, there will also be a term mentioned as R25 if there is a recycled content in that packaging, and that is 25%. Additionally, considering the FCM RPET guidelines which had come in the month of, I guess, May or March 2025, they have also mentioned that additionally the applicable FSSI marking and labeling requirement for food contact applications is also to be followed. So, for example, now what will happen is if your product is a food contact material and you are using recycled PET in that case, you will have to mention R25, or you will have to mention FCM RPT 25 along with a statement on the label that the packaging material is made with recycled PET. But if it is not a FCM RPET material which is being used and it is a other recycled material which is being used, in that case, you don't have to mention the whole statement. It is voluntary now, but you have to mention around the polymer code the term R25. Then there were three new clauses added in the prescribed authority, wherein uh, the authorities of state pollution control board or the state government have been delegated to the ULBs, to the gram panchayats and the district panchayats. And there have been some overlapping situations also. In that case, how those situations would be resolved in terms of jurisdiction, that also has been defined. Next slide, please, Arshi. Yeah. Then there was under a rule a requirement to make a state level monitoring committee for the implementation of the plastic waste management rules. That committee is now restructured, wherein the chief secretary of the state government or the head of the union territory will be the part of the committee as a chairman. Then again, there was a scope extended wherein the state level committee can also invite officers or officials from the district level if they deem necessary. Then, as I said earlier, the environment auditors will now, help the State Pollution Control Board to audit the details or the reports which have been submitted by the ULBs or by the panchayats. Okay. Now, so these were the changes which were there in the plastic waste management rules. Now we are coming to the changes which were there in specifically Schedule 2 of the plastic waste management rules. The first change was there was a very small, drafting error which was there earlier, wherein uh, from the target, the formula for calculation of targets for producers and importers, there was a mention of subclause 4.3. But due to an amendment in March 2025, that subclause 4.3 never existed. It was changed to 4C. So that was a change which they have now, a mistake which they have now rectified. But ideally, on the portal, if you see a producer or a importer can get his target adjusted or can get his target reduced even if he's selling it to other producer or importer. So I guess there are more changes which are required to this particular clause. Then there was a revamp or a change in the obligation for use of recycled plastic content for producer, importers, and brand owners. This we will cover very in depth in the later part of the webinar. So we'll just park it for the time being. Then, under the obligation for reuse, there were again amendments. So, if you see the first clause which was there in the obligation of reuse, it said that these obligations would be subjected to FSSAI regulation. So, let's say FSSAI has given permission um, for reuse of rigid plastic containers in case of packaged drinking waters. In that case, packaged drinking waters will be packaging for packaged drinking waters will be allowed to be reused, but others will not be. But now this exemption per se, the scope of this exemption has been expanded. So now it says that any law or regulation or rule which is notified by the central government or by statutory bodies like FSSAI, SEDESCO, which is your drug controller, or the CIB, that is your pesticides controller, or any other mandatory Indian standards which are in force, they will all be also, form the part of this exemption. Secondly, earlier, if anyone wanted to get the exemption from the using of rigid plastic containers, CPCB had the powers to grant it on case to case basis. So you have to apply for the exemption. CPCB will grant you the exemption, and that is only when you will get the exemption. But now this procedure has changed. Obviously, if you see on the portal, there are approximately 5,000 brand owners which are registered right now. So if so many requests will come to CPCB, it would be a very difficult scenario for them. So for that, what they have done is now this exemption will be on a self-declaration basis. That means that the brand owners at the time of their filing of annual returns will have to declare under which law or which mandatory standard or rule or any act, they have been prohibited for doing, or not using recycle, or for not doing the use of rigid plastic containers. So yes, now the wait time or the lag time is over, and the ball will be now in the court of the brand owner to decide whether they are exempted or not. Then there was, so in the draft amendment, they had proposed to split the reuse obligation for container capacities more than 4.9 liters into two parts. One was the packaged drinking water, and other was the packaging other than the packaged drinking water. So it's a quite common practice which we see in the market also now, in the market recently or in the past year, is that the packaged drinking water packaging which was more than 4.9 liters was widely reused. So their targets remain the way they were, but the targets for other containers, they have been reduced with 25% for the first year, that is 25-26, 26-27 it is 10%, 27-28 it is 15%, and 28-29 again it is 15%. And one more thing, what they have done here is, if you have not met your reuse target for 25-26, in that case, you will be allowed to carry forward those targets. And just for a context, there is a clause, a similar clause in the use of recycled content also, but that is only applicable for food contact materials or food contact packaging. But here it is applicable to all of the rigid containers. But there is a rider that whatever unfulfilled target is there, you have to complete it in the next 3 years, and the completion ratio for each year would be one third. So let's say I have not completed, or I have an unfulfilled target of 90 metric tons. So I will have to compulsorily, or bare minimum, I have to complete 30 metric tons target in the year 26-27, along with my target which is allocated to me in the 26-27. I can do more but not less. Lastly, there was a sentence or a method wherein a reuse calculation was prescribed earlier, which was also mentioned in the guidance manual, that it will be calculated by reducing virgin plastic packaging manufactured or imported. And there was this very vague calculation which they were doing on the portal also, because of which, even if you have not reused the plastic packaging, there was a number which was reflecting on the portal. So now CPCB rightly have scrapped that whole formula, and what they have instead asked for is details. So earlier, let's say if you were introducing 100 tons of plastic packaging, but you were out of those packaging after use, you were actually introducing 500 tons of plastic packaging. In that case, the PIBOs are currently only reporting 100, but now I feel after this amendment, there would be some changes which should be done on the portal, which would enable people to report 500 and then claim that 400 as reuse, which is the right way to do it. But again, it's in the rule, but on the portal, let's see how do they implement it, and if there is any guidelines which is issued for that. Then again, for the compliance of PIBOs, for verification of the compliance or submissions made by PIBOs and PWPs, a designated agency which was earlier powered for who could do this audit, now a registered environmental auditor will also be able to do this audit. So yes, this is all about the amendments which have come in. Now we will take a deep dive in use of recycled plastic or UREP. So, first point is that the percentage or the obligation for the usage of recycled content, that remains the same. There is no reduction or no deferment which has come up, while there was a lot of expectation that there would be some relief given, and considering the global scenario right now, uh, it was even more powerfully expected, but again, no change in the targets. So for 25-26, it is still 30% for category 1, 10% for category 2, and 5% for category 3. 26-27, that is the new financial year which we have entered into. It is 40% for category 1, 10% for category 2, and 5% for category 3. But now what has changed is the method of calculation. So particularly for brand owner, earlier, the percentage was quantity of plastic manufactured during the year. Obviously, it was a quite vague term because brand owners essentially do not manufacture any plastic packaging. So for them, there has been a clarity then that the percentage will be calculated on packaging used during the year. Now again there was a lot of speculation or expectation that this percentage would be calculated on the past years, or there would be some change in the formula for producer or importer for the packaging sold to the brand owner. But no, so each and every entity has to look at their whatever it is, whether it is consumption, it is manufacturing, or it is imported. They have to see their numbers without any dependency on who their customer is. Obviously, from the point of view of exemption, there could be. So, for example, if I am selling it to a food packaging company or a food marketing company, in that case, obviously, I cannot supply them a material which is non-compliant to FSSAI. But now you will have to do that calculations. So there is a very simple example. Which is given in the earlier plastic waste management rules when the whole EPR rules were prescribed. That is simply you have to multiply the packaging introduced in category wise into the market by the minimum percentage which is prescribed. So if the example was 100 tons, if you have introduced into the market, out of which 10 tons should have been the plastic packaging which should be made from recycled plastic. So on this page, we see one, not no change, that is no change in the recycled target percentages. And second is the word used has been prescribed for calculating targets for the brand owner. Next slide, please. What are the other changes? So again, just like reuse under UReP, that is use of recycled content, also the procedure for exemptions has changed. So now you don't have to write to the Central Pollution Control Board that we need an exemption under this clause. It will be again based on the self declarations of the PIBO, wherein they will have to declare what percentage, or what which of the product portfolio, or if the whole product portfolio goes is applicable, or is not allowed to be used or made in recycled plastic due to any applicable law, regulation, rule, or mandatory Indian standards which do not permit it. But one change which also was there in the draft is that if you are eligible for an exemption, earlier you had to fulfill that shortfall due to the exemption by buying of UREP credits. Now that purchase of UREP credits clause is not there in the rules, essentially meaning that if you are exempted, you are exempted, you have to nothing. Now then there is a guidelines which the rules prescribe that the CPCB will is directed to issue a guideline for audit and verification for use of recycled plastic within 6 months from the date of this publication. Third, and I guess a big clarity which we all had self forecasted also, that in terms of category 3, the UREP target will only be limited to the weight of the plastic layer, obviously because other materials are not under the scope of this rule itself. There is no provision for carry forward of Europe targets earlier, but now if you were obligated to use recycled content for food contact materials, in that case your target can be carried forward for the next 3 years. So essentially what this means is, for food contact material there are two scenarios. One is that you are using PET packaging, second is you are using non-PET packaging. In case of non-PET packaging, you will directly be eligible for the exemption. But in case of PET packaging, what will happen is your target for 25-26 can be carried forward to the next 3 years. Again, with the rider or a condition that minimum of one third has to be fulfilled in each of the three carried forward years. Importer of plastic packaging, they so there is not much change for them. Again, if they are also eligible for exemption, I am not sure how they will be eligible for exemption. But if they are eligible for exemption, the exemption clause remains same for them. But they have to buy UREP credits from the PIBOs who have generated or who have completed or done extra or over compliances. So on now only the importer of plastic packaging has to buy UREP credits, that is, which would be based on the percentage of plastic quantity imported. Yeah. So now these were, I guess, now we have covered all the amendments which had come in. Um, Okay, now we'll move towards the practical aspect of recycled content. So, as we mentioned earlier, that a guideline for audit and verification of UREP or use of recycled plastic shall be provided by the CPCB within 6 months of the date of the publication. But the rules also specify that a recycled plastic packaging must conform to standards IS standard 14534, that is plastics recovery and recycling of plastic waste guidelines. So a simple example, so whenever you go to buy a jewelry to a jeweler shop, to check the purity of that jewelry, the first thing which you ask is what is the hallmark. Is it 92 or 22 carats or 24 carats or 18 carat? But for plastics there is no such reliable technology which can determine the recycled content in a material. So because of that, what the IS standard specifies is that the audit and certification of manufacturing facilities will be required for traceability of use of recycled content. So they have defined two standards through which the traceability of use of recycled content and the percentage of recycled content which is there in a packaging will be determined. First one is the European standards EN 15343, that is plastics, recycled plastics, plastics recycling, traceability and assessment of conformity and recycled content. And the second is ISO standard 22095, that is chain of custody, general terminology methods. So this is the ISO standard which is there, and it is the specific clause which is referred to. And I am sure the guidelines which CPCB will be preparing will also be in similar lines, or there would be some sort of inspiration which will be taken from these guidelines, which are global. Next slide, please. Okay, so firstly, how is a recycled content percentage calculated? So over the past 1 year, I have personally spoken to a lot of producers. I have spoken to a lot of brand owners, and while they were incorporating recycled content into their packaging, but to so let's say there is a multi-layer packaging. There are three layers. There is PET, there is PP, there is P. In that case, in PET they were doing 70%, in PP they were doing nothing, and in PE also they were doing nothing. So in that case, how the recycled percentage would be calculated? So the formula is very simple. It says that whatever is the mass of the recycled material in the product divided by the total mass of the product. So let's say I have a small laminate, maybe the size of an handkerchief, and the total mass of that handkerchief is only 10 grams. In that, if the recycled content is 4 grams, that means the recycled content is 40%. And if there are multiple layers, then you have to multiply the weight of each layer, or microns of each layer with the recycled content, and reach to the recycled percentage, because that is something which is required to be reported on the CPCB portal also. So whenever, let's say, if I am a brand owner who is buying a laminate or a packaging which has recycled content, there is a column wherein the brand the producer has to report the overall percentage of the recycled content and not the layer wise percentages. Then, firstly, what is accepted? So, pre-consumer waste is also accepted currently. So, if you see the IS standard 14534, there is no distinction saying that only post-consumer waste is will be counted as recycled material, or pre-consumer waste cannot be counted as recycled material. But what the EN standard 15343 says is that if there is any in-process regrind or scrap, so let's say there is a scrap which is generated on the production line, and that scrap again is put in the extrusion or in the input material. In that case, that is not counted. But if it is a pre-consumer waste, let's say I have some clean plastic, or a shrink wrap, LDP shrink wrap which is there, I can use that pre-consumer waste uh, to generate recycled content. So a lot of people interchangeably use PCR and UREP as the same term, but ideally all PCR is UREP, but all UREP is not PCR. It can be PIR also. So yeah, next slide please. So on the portal, how or what is the procedure of claiming recycled content? So the first step is that the recycler has to pass on the entry to the producer. So due to the scarcity of material or the scarcity of recycled materials, what a lot of brand owners were doing is that they were buying the recycled materials themselves, and then they were either selling it to the producers, or they were issuing it on job work basis. But there were some changes which were made on the portal, wherein if a PWP is dealing with a brand owner, in that case they cannot pass the benefit of the recycled material sold to them on the CPCB portal. So the drop down only provides the option for producers. Secondly, there is a issue of PET flakes. So BT flakes, apparently apparently there is there is a chance wherein a double benefit or double benefit of recycled UREP credits are EPR credits have been taken. So that is why there is currently, if you enter the HSN code of flakes on the PWP portal, it says that this HSN code is currently blocked. But what is happening is essentially because of this, that see, PET in nature does not requires or is not required to be converted to granules, essentially to for packaging, to be reused for packaging purposes. But this representation, I guess, a lot of people or a lot of people in the industry have sent to the CPCB that there needs to be a solution on how the flakes can be incorporated in the whole system. But as of date, when we speak, the flakes are not allowed to be entered on the system. So once the recycler or the PWP enters the data on the portal, the same is reflected in the producer's account in their procurement, with the percentage inputted by the recycler as the recycle percentage in his procurement. Then what the producer is required to do is they are required to declare their sales, wherein again in the sales, as I mentioned previously, that they are required to contain or report the recycled percentage of recycled content which they have sold to the, maybe it could be a contract manufacturer or it could be a brand owner. That step is there, but a producer by itself cannot show a procurement from an unregistered recycler. So in the current screenshot, if you see, it is the report or the screenshot is stating that the sale is being made to a registered producer, a registered brand owner or a registered person. But if the procurement is made by an unregistered PWP, or from a trader, which is also happening in a lot of cases, that a trader is selling the recycled granules to the producers, in that case the benefit of that recycled granules cannot be passed on to the producer or the brand owner, because the chain on the portal is getting broken. Only a PWP can transfer this entry to the producer or the um, essentially to the producer on the portal. Next slide, please. Then the brand owner has to do his part. So once the entry is reflected to the brand owners, the brand owner has to report its state-wise consumption, wherein they are expected to give their whole consumption as well as the percentage of recycled plastic which is being used in the consumption or introduction which they have done into the market. Accordingly, once they submit it, it is reflected in their annual returns with the full page which comes on the portal. In the right hand column, there is a table or a column called as UReP tons, wherein if you enter these details properly in your state-wise consumption, you might or you will be allowed to claim recycled plastics on the portal. Next slide, please. And once you have claimed it on the portal, ideally, as per the guidance manual which is there on the portal, it says that the UREP credit shall be generated on based on the recycled content in the packaging sold in the market. Since till year 2025, there are no EPR targets for Europe. The entire quantity will get reflected in the wallet. But currently, some people are able to see that quantity in their wallet. Some are seeing some less quantity. Some are not seeing some quantities. So there is a question mark on how or what is the effectiveness. But currently, you are not able to trade or generate credits from that eligible or the potential which is there. So again, yes, that is why there is a disclaimer that the functionality is yet to be active on the portal or is not fully functional. Next slide, please. So, a final takeaway that is that the whole recycler, the converter or the producer, the contract manufacturer, and the brand owner, they all have to work in tangent and in coordination with each other to ensure that this recycle content claim is made successfully on the portal. There should be a batch level traceability which should be maintained at each and every stage of value chain. So, for example, the recycler should have an account of what is the material which they were using. The producers have to make an account of which batch of the recycler or which recycler's material was used to make this particular batch. Again, the same thing for the contract manufacturer because that paper trail will help you prove that the recycled content is being used, or else that is only based on the portal reporting which is there. At each and every stage of transaction, the invoices should also explicitly disclose the percentage of recycled content used because the same is again required to be reported on the portal as well. All the parties, needless to say, the recycler, the converter, the producer, the contract manufacturers, and the brand owners, all of these people need to register on the portal. Currently, the SIMP module is only operational for registration purposes. That means that when you register as a SIMP or a small producer on the portal, you are not allowed or you don't have the option to input purchase and sales on the portal. So if a PWP is selling to a SIMP producer or a brand is buying from a SIMP producer, we might have to wait for getting some clarity from the Central Pollution Control Board on how these scenarios will be captured in the portal if the provision is not there for them. Again, at each and every stage, there is a 40% validation between the procurement and the sales quantity, which is essentially a mass balance check, which the CPCB is doing on the portal. But again, invoice is needed. So for example, if you are giving materials on job work basis, so let's say I am the factory waste which is being generated in my plant, I am giving it to a recycler on a job work basis and he is just invoicing me for the services which he has rendered to me. In that case also the recycled content benefit cannot be passed to the producer also because there is no GST invoice which is to be uploaded on the portal. Next slide, please. Okay. In terms of documentation, I have been hearing a lot, what documents or what we should take care as a good to have item. So when the transaction is between a recycler and a converter, maybe a signed declaration, say giving the details of the batch and whether, all the standards that is 14534 and the EN standards, and if there are any other standards of FCM RPET, if they are, uh, adhered or not, that should be taken as a declaration. An invoice which should be there for every batch or invoice or a lot basically. Traceability documents to be made available if required. So tomorrow, let's say if there is in the CPCB audit scheme, if they ask for the traceability documents of the whole chain, in that case they should be required with they should be available with the recycler and the entry on the EPR portal, which is very necessary because whatever hassle you are doing, of on shelf life testing, sourcing, selecting of the vendor, and all of those things, all of that things fail if the recycler is not able to enter the data on the portal due to any of the reasons which might be there. one time or annual compliance which you should take, or the documentation which you should take, is a registration certificate and a screenshot from the dashboard of the PWP, any test reports which are there for the standards, and in case of FSSI, FCM RPET, in that case authorization or NOC process validation and audit report which is there is something which you should take, which is a good to have thing. Currently there is no rule per se that says that you have to, but maybe future in the future when the guidelines for audit is coming, in that case you might be asked for these things. When the transaction is between a converter and a brand owner, or converter brand or contract manufacturer brand owner, the documents more or less on the batch wise basis are same. Entry on the portal is required. Invoice reflecting a correct recycle percentage should be there. There should be a declaration which should be there. One important thing which I have been experiencing in the last couple of years is that a lot of times brand is claiming recycle content, but the producer is deleting the entry after the brand is filing the return. In that case, a safeguard which brand should take is an acknowledgement that the converter or the producer has filed their annual returns. While there can be a scenario that the annual returns are opened by the Central Pollution Control Board on the request of the producer or the converter, but this is something which you need to take care, because let's say we do everything correct, we get the entry on the portal, we have the EPR invoice number of the portal, but if the entry is deleted, yeah, after filing of returns or after filing of return of a brand owner, there could be some implication. While I'm sure there would be a trail of documents which would be there, but this is something which the brand should take care of. And obviously you need to also check your artwork, because again there was amendment in March 2026 also, wherein the artwork was again revamped for the recycled plastics. So ensure that your artwork is updated along as per the guidelines whatever are coming in. So I guess yes, we have shoot up on the time. I'll just take a couple of minutes of you guys. So in terms of action points, uh, since the financial year 25-26 is already closed, I suggest companies to look at or assess their packaging portfolio, what type of packaging, primary, secondary, tertiary, or what kind of packaging is getting qualified for exemption or which is not qualified for exemption. For the producers, you will have to see, or you will have to understand the business of of your customers to understand whether if the packaging was a food grade packaging or not, because again how the target calculation will happen, the example is very simple in the rules, but if it is something different, you will have to take care of it. Calculate the recycle content percentage. I see a lot of producers, they do not have the capability, or there is some gap between the person who is doing the EPR activity, then so you need to calculate the percentage of recycle content. If there is any non-compliance in the whole value chain, that is, let's say your contract manufacturer is not registered, or your producer is not registered, or your PWP is also not registered, in that case the whole claim might get rejected on the portal, or there might be a failure for claiming those quantity as recycled content. Follow up with their suppliers for their filing and the entry reflection, and finally do your submission. Violation. See, currently the EC guidelines prescribe the violation or the penalty or the environmental compensation for any kind of shortfall, whether it is for recycling or for end of life or for UREP or for reuse, as the same amount. But as per our analysis, if you see the way they have calculated or they have come up to these amounts, that is 2,900 for Cat 1, Cat 2 5,000, and Cat 3 7,900, they have only taken into account the factors of collection and transportation of plastic waste, setting up of MRF, and setting up of RDF and operation facilities. They have not taken into account the cost of setting up of a recycling facility, or the cost of processing which is there, or in case of reuse the cost of reverse logistics. So this is my or our analysis that there would be some change to the EC guidelines, wherein there could be some bifurcation on recycling rates, end of life rates, UREP rates, and reuse rates. So yes, I guess that is it from my side. Over to you, Arushi. Thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you so much, Sujan. I'm sure that was a lot to take in because it is a very important topic as of now, and it directly impacts all the obligated entities on which are registered on the EPR plastic portal. And so many updates coming in. So I'm sure that this would have helped you. But the basic takeaway that I have, the most important thing that becomes necessary for all the obligated entities now is a EPR UReP due diligence. Now, if any one of you wants to know more about that and wants support on that, so we can help you there, and we can help you with the value chain audit, gap identification, corrective action plan, and EPR footprint calculation to help you with your UReP due diligence. So if you want to look for any support or assistant on that, please feel free to reach out to our team, and we will reach out to you. We will have a direct conversation with you. We'll see how it is applicable to your business and what are the customized pointers that we can take for you and how we can take this up. So again, thank you all the participants for joining in, and a very special thank you to Mr. Sujain Jain for sharing his valuable insights and practical guidance that will help all the obligated entities to deal with their EPR compliances. As EPR regulations and portals, they continue to evolve, staying updated is very important than ever. So you must be updated on all the EPR compliances coming in and how they are going to impact your business or how they are impacting your business in the current scenario. So with this, we will be wrapping up this session. Thank you very much for participating in and joining in for the webinar. And we will see you very soon with another informative webinar wherein we will be covering another important updates. And in case you have any doubts, any queries, any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you so much and have a lovely weekend ahead.